here, right now. Calling out to all area crew, we gon' make it all happen right here, right now. Calling out to all area crew, we gon' make it all happen right here, right now. Calling out to all area crew, we gon' make it all happen right here, right now.
What's up, guys? It's Mike and Ryan for the Egg Show. And
hey, everybody.
Hey, what's up? We got Eric Merrill here. I mean, he's graciously opened his house to let us come and do an episode. And Eric Merrill is a web developer. What's your actual title?
So right now I'm a manager of engineering at
Workfront. And Eric and I go way back. Like, what was it, 6th grade? 7th grade we met? Something like that?
Yeah, just about. Was
it KPMS, Key Peninsula Middle School, out on the Peninsula, Lake Bay area. And we've kind of made full circle here. Like, we had a fun childhood. We spent a lot of time together, lots of sleepovers, lots of crazy stuff. And now he is a senior web developer and is a really good friend of mine. And he's actually tutoring me on a project that I've been working on for the last few years. And he was nice enough to offer some of his time once a week to go over teaching an idiot how to do JavaScript. So thank you for that. And thank you for making time to come on our podcast.
Yeah, and for anybody that's been listening to the show with any degree of regularity, you've heard Mike talk about this top secret project. So you have some awareness of how long this thing's been going on for. I mean, he's been working on this forever, painstakingly, and yeah, has really upped his game in the last little bit working with Eric. So pretty excited to meet Eric. Today was my first time meeting him, even though I've heard about him for a long time. And so yeah, excited to get the show going.
So give us a little background on your web career or your programming career. You have a degree in what's your degree and what's your focus?
So I have a bachelor's degree in computer information technology. I went to college. I thought I'd be a lawyer because, that's cool. You watch all those law shows and it just seemed really exciting. I'm a real rational person. I love logic.
Well, see, that's the thing is in like middle school and stuff like that, I didn't see that in you. I didn't see, were you just a closet logic guy?
Well, I don't know if it was true in high school. Yeah. Then I was real into cars. I thought I would design cars for a living, but then I realized I don't really have any artistic skills. So,
but you're still sort of drawn to the mechanical or the technical anyway, and or it sounds like. I mean, if you were into doing cars, it seems like there's some parallels there between the technical know-how of building out cars or designing cars as to web development or programming specifically.
Well, and what I thought was unique and interesting was, you're in a very analytical field. It's very thought process and thought driven, but it's also creative on its own right, because, and you have a client telling you, I want this, and you have to think and be creative of how you do it and how you do it in a logical process to get the end result, but also get what the client wants at the same time. So I just thought that would be a very interesting change of pace from what we're normally used to. We usually do like DJs and graphic designers and, I think we've had one cook, Sean O'Neill, but other than that, and a couple of radio guys, but no one in the programming or computer science field. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to see that side of things.
Yeah, well, and what's really cool too, and it's something we've talked about on a lot of shows, and I think it just bears repeating, is this concept that creativity sort of comes in all forms. When this show was first born, the concept was that it would be a creativity podcast. We wanted to talk about things like, what in my mind was sort of traditional creativity, sort of artists, designers, things like that. And then as Mike and I worked more together on the show and sort of realized, oh, wait a minute, in his profession as a DJ, that's also requires, a ton of creativity. It's different than like me in advertising and marketing, but it's still creativity. And as we've gone through this show, now we're 42 episodes deep, and we've talked to a number of people from a number of different disciplines. We're finding that core creativity exists really across all platforms. And, computer science is actually no exception. And I think a lot of people look at things like computer programming and sort of really technical fields like that, and they don't instantly make the connection that it's creative. They think about it more. The word you used was logical. It's more a technical experience versus a creative or an aloof kind of experience. But what you don't, what you realize once you start really digging into this kind of into this field is the creativity required to basically make your software or your app or whatever it is perform and solve the challenges that you've got to challenge, or the challenges that you've got. And that requires significant amounts of creativity. And so I think Eric will be able to sort of elaborate on that and how that works.
Yeah. So you got your degree, and what was your first foot in the door at your first job once you kind of got out of college?
So I actually started working in software during college. I worked on the college student software engineering team and helped work on the website. Yeah. So that's where it really started, and it was on the web. So I just kind of transitioned naturally over to that in my career. I did an internship at USAA, working for a huge company, and really just decided that maybe partially because you didn't get that creative aspect of programming. It was really more about getting very small things done and spending a whole lot of overhead doing it. So when I went to find an actual job, I found one for a small company with less than 100 employees, where you really did wear a lot of hats, and your ability to solve problems in different ways allowed some of that creativity to come out.
That's cool. So you enjoy the smaller firms versus the big 1,000+ employees because it's more of a family environment, you'd say, or more like just a easier or more of a creativity process because you have more hats. You're a full stack developer versus just front end or back end or.
I definitely enjoyed that at first, but as I've gotten older and I've got more kids and more demands on my time, it's actually harder to keep up with that because you are touching so many different areas of that tech stack. So now I work for a company that's close to 1,000 employees, and I have my team, and we work on that, and we've got our area of ownership. So it almost feels like a small company within the larger company, but working for a smaller company, it's more the traditional. You're working a lot of overtime, you're getting a lot of hours in to try to get stuff done, and startup mentality.
Yeah. So I imagine being at a smaller firm, if you have a deadline coming up, you're just there all the time. You have zero free time. You have no work-life balance per se. So you're always work mode versus having time with your family, your kids, and stuff like that. Have you been able to kind of, now that you're at a bigger firm and have more people around you to work with, are you able to kind of take a step back and have more time with your family and kind of regulate that a little more? Or you kind of still, if it needs to be done, you have to be there?
It ebbs and flows. There's times, even right now, even currently, where I'm working a lot of hours, probably closer to 50 to 60 hours a week. But that's not the usual time that I spend. Here in Utah, it's got that family oriented mentality. So, I was putting in 40 hours a week on average.
Yeah.
But we've got our deadlines, and as professionals, we commit to things, and so if we're poor in our estimates and we're falling behind, we work overtime in order to make up for it and try to hit our deadlines.
Well, hey, I wanted to back up just a little bit. I think, Eric, I don't know exactly how old you are, but if you're, a similar age with Mike, we're sort of all, contemporaries.
Like 6 months apart. Yeah.
So I was just curious if you had sort of the same experience I did. So growing up, basically, the internet came to be in our lifetime versus these young kids that are being born into it. Did you find that, were you drawn to the internet early on? Meaning, people were building websites and you wanted to get into it. So were you doing a lot of self-teaching? Because nowadays you've got things like Pluralsight and different places where you can go and you can learn just about anything you want, and it's really available. But I know, for me, when I was younger and I wanted to build my first website, for example, I couldn't just go to Squarespace and build a website. I had to build a website. And so I was forced to sort of learn programming, or at least some, to some extent, in order to do that.
One of the first sites you built was one of mine.
Yeah, one of the early DJ sites.
Dreamweaver, I think.
Yeah, in Dreamweaver, in just straight HTML with some big nasty JPEG images and stuff.
The very front page was a giant JPEG.
Little
and you had
hotspots
a
everywhere.
hotspot on the left and right if you're a school or a wedding person.
Yeah.
I remember that. That was a
but I just wondered if you sort of, because of, or if you had any perspective on growing up with it, if you noticed that it helped you, I guess, now in your career, or put you somehow ahead because of having to really dig your way through the trenches, like while things were being developed.
No, probably not. It didn't influence me too much, just because I hadn't decided I'd wanted to go into programming yet. So by the time I did want to go into programming, I was halfway through college, and we had high-speed internet, and I had my college courses to focus on. But what you're saying now is so true. Like it's just growing more and more where we have people come and apply for software engineering jobs that didn't do the formal schooling, and at first they might struggle a little bit because of just lacking some of the concepts for programming, but within 6 months to a year, they're just pretty caught up to people who spend 4 years in college. So it's definitely changing.
Well, then on that, because I've asked this question in the last couple of podcasts, and it's quickly becoming a recurring theme for me. What is your perspective, especially now as a manager and as somebody who's doing the hiring, and we won't get into, but the firing, do you have a perspective or a stance on formal education versus non-formal in terms of the people who come to work for you and things like that? Like, are you finding people who have maybe been self-taught or worked their way, through different platforms on their own? Are they every bit as good, not as good? Are you finding better quality candidates straight out of university versus people who've come up, through a non-traditional path?
Well, part of why he says that is because a lot of the illustrators he gets or designers from like BYU Ad Lab or whatever, they'll come out and they have the same portfolio, the same product that everyone else has, and it's kind of, sifting through the weeds. Whereas, I think a lot of the developers and the people coming up, taking like Treehouse or lynda.com approach or all this stuff, for me, trying to learn it, I had no clue what to learn. And that was the biggest problem, because I would focus on one language and find out it's obsolete, or focus on something that doesn't even matter anymore. So I guess I would think that going through college and going through a structured program like that, they would be on top of, what technology to learn or what software to learn, versus someone that, is self-taught.
Trying to figure it out on their own.
Yeah. I think there's some of that for sure. Like, I think it depends on each individual's personality. If you're the kind of person that can spend that extra time knowing what you need to learn, and you've got that self-motivation, then I don't know that college is necessary for the vast majority of programming jobs out there. You can just go learn it. I mean, there's, like you said, there's tons of online learning programs that you can come up to speed on programming. But what I would say is that some of the concepts they teach you in computer science programs, you're not just going to run into on your day-to-day jobs, but occasionally for some of the harder problems, it's going to come in really beneficial. So it's like, as somebody involved in the hiring process, I would just want to make sure that I have people on my team that are both, have that more computer science background, as well as just, code monkeys, people who have come out of some of the boot camps or whatnot. That's fine. Or once you've got 2 years of experience, it's just like, again, it doesn't really matter what education you've got. We're not looking on your resume and saying, did you get a bachelor's degree? Or did you get a master's degree? It just doesn't matter. It's experience.
Well, and that's what I guess I'm trying to figure out as I'm talking to different people from different disciplines. Our guest last week, Dylan Mangus, was a really qualified, really high level, creative director, art guy. And so he offered some unique perspective on this, as well as some other people we've talked to in the past. And I guess that's what I'm trying to establish, is it seems like there's maybe the way that we do formal education in this country might be evolving. And so I'm just trying to kind of get a pulse, for people, especially folks in hiring positions, to see what they think about the importance of that. Not to say, kids don't go to school or whatever, I mean, obviously you need to chase down and get whatever training you can, and not everybody's going to be self-disciplined enough to do it on their own. It certainly requires an extra degree of oomph that not everybody's got. But anyway, I think it's interesting to get other people's perspectives. I know in my industry, for example, in advertising and marketing, your book or your portfolio, can go a long way towards work versus, maybe you got that big fancy degree, but if you've got the same portfolio that everyone else does, I can't tell that you're any better than anyone else.
Yeah, and we've definitely got that equivalent in the programming world with GitHub. If you don't have the experience, then you probably ought to have a GitHub link attached to your resume or application so we can go see what work you've done, what side projects you've worked on that will demonstrate that real world experience that we're looking for.
So can you break down like your hiring process at Workfront? Like say I wanted to go and apply for a job there. What would you guys put me through to even become qualified for an interview?
It's going to depend on a little bit on what level you have and what role you're going for, but generally you submit us your resume. There's going to be a panel of people who review the resume. We're going to be looking for keywords. So it's like, the whole idea of
coder
gaming the system really works, at least as far as getting you through to the interview. And once, we say, yeah, that resume looks good, he's got what we're looking for, you'll be sent some sort of take-home coding challenge test that will give you the ability to demonstrate your coding finesse, and then you'll send it back to us, and we'll again make a judgment based on how elegant the code is, whether it solved the problems, and typically we'll have tests associated with that. Did it make the test pass? So is it actually functional? And then if we like it, then we'll bring you in for an on-site where we do more like a cultural fit interview, and again just a kind of a double take on the technical expertise to make sure that you weren't just using Google and you got it because you're good at Googling versus actually having that knowledge hands-on. Not that that's bad. I mean, in my field, that's what you do. You Google all day long.
Somebody else has already solved the problem.
The internet goes down and we're all, what do we do? Can't access the API docs. What, Stack Overflow? I can't get to it. Who's going to solve my problem for me?
No joke, right?
So I have to know, in the cultural sit down, do you guys sit in a black room lit only by monitors? Do you simulate mom's basement or anything like that?
No, I don't know.
Or has the developer of the past become a little more modern? They're not afraid of the light anymore.
You've still got a mix. You've got the typical antisocial programmer that doesn't want anything to do with people, and then you've got the new programmer. So no, it's a mix. Silicon Valley. You guys watch that show?
Yeah.
That kind of mentality. Hey, we're cool. We code, but we're still cool.
So I saw like 1 or 2 episodes of that, and I think I made a note to go and check it out, and never did. So I kind of want to go and
it's
just
pretty.
have a
It's pretty
weekend.
great. It's worth watching.
I think you showed me the first episode. I think it was at your house. But yeah, so let's step back a little bit and go back over the last, I don't know, how you've been doing this out of school for like 10 years now?
Yeah, 10 plus years.
10 plus years. So when you first got out, I mean, technology has come a long way since then. And I can imagine just staying relevant in this industry is pretty tough. Can you go over like how much you have to study every week or month or whatever just to stay in the know and be able to, be relevant?
Yeah. So again, there's going to be a divide depending on what technology stack you're working on. Like if you think of back-end programmers, your typical enterprise working in Java or .NET, that stuff just doesn't change as rapidly as front-end tech. So you don't have to spend as much time keeping your skills sharp, and your years of experience is going to matter a lot more for employers. But when you start going into the front-end development, that's where my expertise lies. Suddenly it's like, hey, you can't have 5 years of experience on any given framework because there's a new framework every 6 months, and it's like, all right, you have as much experience as that college grad, so it's a lot harder. You're constantly having to learn new things. It's one of the struggles that I have, and one of the reasons that I wanted to go to the management route was I kind of feel like as I've gotten older, I don't have that time and that passion that I used to have to continually be learning those new technologies in the depth that you need to succeed in the industry.
Yeah.
So in your path, or with people you've worked with, or as you've worked your way up into management, have you found, or do you think as far as a programmer, maybe somebody coming up in the business or who's looking for work, do you find a lot of specialists or a lot of generalists? Like, do you get your just Java guy, or do you need somebody that can cover 3 or 4 different languages or 3 or 4 different technologies? Or do you have a preference, I should say? Is there maybe one way that's better than another?
Again, it's going to depend on the level of the person. It's like if you're entry level, you're going to be expected to know one language. But as you get into that senior level, it's expected that it doesn't matter what language you've programmed in. You should be able to come up to speed within 6 weeks on any language. So if you've done .NET and we're a Java shop, fine. As long as you know the basic programming concepts, you should be able to pick up a new language pretty quick.
That's one thing that I kind of figured out just through trial and error, because when I first started working on this project that I'm doing, I started studying Bootstrap, and I didn't realize that Bootstrap was just layout. It was just, scalability and functionality, nothing to do with the actual programming part of it. It was more just design side. And then I realized, it's not that simple. Now I got to learn a language now, and I studied PHP, and PHP, come to find out, was obsolete. And then I thought the next thing I needed to learn was Ruby on Rails, because when I sat down with you at the time, that was the one to know, right? And what was it, like 4 years ago, we sat down and had lunch, and I would go the Ruby on Rails kind of thing, and I was like, okay. So I kind of did a little bit of research on that, not enough. I didn't go deep into it because there's only so much you can learn on your own. And then I come to find out that, JavaScript's the way to go. And now there's React and Node.js and all this other stuff. And it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it is. Even for somebody in the industry.
Yeah. And for me, it was downright depressing, to be honest with you.
Sorry about that.
Well, no, I mean, it's my own doing, not to get off on another project, but we did a project for a friend of mine that he had a WordPress site, and it was functioning and it was doing the job that it needed to be done. And I had another guy that was a developer, but he just did PHP. And I had no clue how much of a nightmare or a pain in the butt this was going to be, just because lack of knowledge, I didn't realize that, all the user information is in a database inside the WordPress plugin, and accessing it and pulling it out and doing all this other stuff. I think I ended up going through, and there were 15,000 entries in a database I had to update manually just to make it work. And that took about 6 months of time just to do, but it ended up, the site's up and live now, but I would have never even got my feet into that mess if I would have known how much effort that took. And, I think we mentioned it before, when I came to you to say, hey, I got this idea, let's build this site. You're like, I'm good. And, I learned a lot just out of that interaction, just because you knew how much of a pain in the butt it was going to be, and you knew how much work would be involved. And you said up front, nope, I'm good. Whereas me, not knowing, I'm like, yeah, we can do this. And then we'll jump in and realize, oh man, I just screwed myself. And, I think that just through that process of, trying to get my idea off the ground, and the last 3 years of my life, I have grown tremendously just in my thought process, my level of, willingness to say no to people. Because before I'd be like, yeah, I can throw out a quick WordPress site for you, and yeah, I can do this. And it really, I'm okay with telling people no now.
And you're a jerk, Mike.
No, and the fact that you're actually working with me and taking time out of the limited time you have with your family as is, and just spending, 3 hours here and there or whatever, even if I have a question, seriously, I'll feel bad even emailing you questions sometimes, just because I'm like,
you should feel bad. Eric was telling me earlier, this is becoming a problem.
This jerk.
So, hey, so in a related question, and maybe there's not even a clear answer to this, but let's say I'm, 14-year-old computer nerd. I love my iPhone. I'm thinking about what to do for a career, stuff like that. And to Mike's point, if you just sit down and you try and say, I want to get into computer programming, that can mean a million things to a million people. And depending on your position, your technologies and things like that might vary. Can you think of, or could you recommend a place to start for somebody who might be interested in going down this path? in terms of, are there some sort of fundamental languages they ought to have a good handle on before they really specialize? Or, is there some core learnings that they ought to have in place before they really get into trying to do this as a profession?
Yeah, the thing about it is if you're going to stick with anything, you've got to love what you're doing. So it's like, what would be the reason they'd want to get into programming? Are they into gaming? Because they've got awesome tools that, for Minecraft, where they use Minecraft as a tool to teach people programming, making mods and things like that. There's lots of stuff out there. If they want to do web, then it's about, hey, what do I need to do to get my own website up so that people can look at it? It's just wherever your passion lies, there's going to be a way to apply programming to it. And it's, becoming so commonplace that they're having programming classes in elementary school now.
Well, your kids are doing
Yeah,
JavaScript
my kids have
right
been
now.
learning Scratch, I think is the website they use, but it's basically teaching Java.
Yeah, is that a drag and drop?
Yeah, they
tool?
drag and drop the little pieces of code and build scripts to execute different things. They build little games.
I'm doing
and
it
stuff.
all wrong. I need to do the dragon.
Yeah, go back to Scratch. That's the one. So, but okay, well, cool. Well, that's really interesting.
Well, and on that note, last week I went to a meetup. I've never gone to one of those before, and it's actually kind of unique. It's kind of cool. Just meetup.com, and if you're into photography, if you want to go on runs with people who like running, there are different activities that you can go to, and one of them that I went to last week was just a JavaScript fundamentals, and then there was more advanced class right after it. So I stuck around and sat through the advanced class, and this guy was a game developer. And he literally, in the amount of time that we were there, he had 45 minutes, and he sat down and he built it was kind of like a Pac-Man game in 45 minutes. It wasn't like completely functional, but, we were throwing out suggestions, and it was like a hybrid of Pac-Man and Minecraft, where if you hit a certain dot, you lost life, and if you hit another dot, you gain life. And just watching him be able to type this complex CSS and JavaScript and everything to get what he wanted on the screen and get the movement and action out of it, just out of his head, it boggled my mind. I was like, how does he remember all this? How does he know all this? And, it probably just comes down to the fact that he does it for 8 hours a day, and it's just, second nature to him now.
Yeah, there's also the 80-20 principle plays really heavy in programming. You can get 80% of that functionality in 20% of the time. And then the rest of it is just things you don't think about, like error checking or whatever. I think it hides some of the complexities of programming and why it's so difficult is we can make it look very functional really quick. Prototyping is a thing. So,
yeah. So how long do you think it took for you to get comfortable to the point where, you didn't second guess everything you did? Because that's what I'm doing right now. The project, we're building components in my project right now, and we're working with MongoDB and some other stuff, and I've been kind of studying that, and now I can kind of look at it and replicate it, but I can't just write it from scratch. Was there just a defining moment where you were like, oh, I got this, and you can just kind of do your thing, or is it still you have issues with it?
If you're just talking about in general, when did programming click for me? I'd say it's probably a year and a half into my first real world job where I was finally like, hey, this isn't so hard. And the pattern kind of has followed suit pretty much 6 months into a job before I'm fully comfortable with the technology stack and feel like, okay, I'm back up to where I was in my previous company, and I've got the domain knowledge down, and I understand the way that they do the programming here, because that's going to be different on every team and in every company.
So just even changing a job, for example, you might have to learn a whole new language based on what they've built in the past and what they're working with, or...
You might have to learn a new language, but even if you don't, they're likely going to be using different libraries, different aspects of the tech stack that you're going to have to become familiar with.
Yeah, so different functions that were written, and you have to kind of get familiar with that.
Yeah, and you just go back to the idea of coding as creative. It's like you get 5 programmers in the room to come up with a solution. You're gonna have 5 different solutions because there's no one way to do it, and there's not even a right way to do it. There's just different ways to do it, and there's going to be trade-offs, pros and cons.
The end result is what you're going for, and the 5 people kind of have to communicate on the best way to come up with the example.
Yeah, and if you take a group of people that are in a company for a while, they're going to start to align in the way they do things. So when you come in from the outside, you're going to have to learn how they do things. And again, there's going to be conformity that you have to have in order to just, again, maintain that, hey, we can get things done without having that contention all the time about what's the right way to do it.
So you mentioned it took like a year and a half before it sort of clicked and you felt like you were fully competent in what you were doing. Can you talk about maybe how you got your first gig? Like, your first actual programming job. I don't mean like, working at Jack in the Box or something, but
it was Burger King.
That's true.
But your first like real programming gig, like your first, right out of college or whatever, and you step into a position where maybe you don't know it all. How did you get to, I guess, how did you handle that interview? How did you, make that next step? I know for a lot of people, if you were trying to become a web programmer, it might be difficult to pick the right position or something like that. So I wondered if you could share any advice about getting that first job, because it seems like maybe once you're in, you've got some time to really learn, either your language or the needs of that particular company. Your skills get up to a certain level. You can learn new languages really quick. But how do you do that first one?
Yeah, that first one is so hard. I mean, there's so many companies that will reject you just based on, hey, he doesn't have the minimum 2 years experience. So really, it's hard. And I'm not sure that I did it the best way, but I did shotgun approach. I just applied a lot of places, and I think I ended up with about 3 offers by the time I probably applied at 15 different companies. And I don't know. I think that it's looking for a company that's willing to take a risk on you. So whereas I got a job in a small company, oftentimes a bigger company, it's easier to get your foot in the door as a new developer.
Just because they have more jobs to go around.
They have more jobs. They've got more resources.
Maybe don't need you to wear quite as many hats and that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to that end, do you prefer as a programmer working on a team of developers where you do just wear your singular hat maybe, or maybe 2 or 3 instead of 20 hats, or do you like to work on a team? Like, do you prefer the team environment versus the individual environment, or the pros and cons to each?
I don't know that there is a such thing as individual in programming. I know there's that stereotype, again, because you get all the antisocial programmers, but in reality, we work on teams. There's just the idea that you can just be an awesome programmer and just get stuff done and not interact with others, such as UX and designers and program managers and quality assurance. It's not feasible. Unless you're at a really, really small company and then you've got that startup mentality where you really are the only developer. It just doesn't happen. I think that there would be advantages to that. If you start really small, then of course you don't have somebody that can go and you can't go ask questions to somebody. You've got to figure it out yourself. You can Google it, but sometimes you're dealing with
problem solving on your own.
Yeah. Whereas if you find yourself in a big company, there's going to be somebody who has the answers. So you're going to be able to, use that as a crutch. You won't probably grow as fast.
Interesting. Are there any industry sites or blogs that you read regularly, or conferences you might go to stay current?
I've tried that whole thing, and I do subscribe with RSS, don't judge, to various like JavaScript Ninja, and I don't even know what they are because I subscribed so long ago. I just get them in my feed, but honestly, I just don't get a whole lot out of that. More, it's like it might come across with some new buzzword, and I'll go, what is that? And go Google it. I do have a Pluralsight subscription, so I'll occasionally do courses on there. But no, it's mostly, what's the latest hot thing that people are talking about? Conferences, I do tend to go to one conference a year. And again, I think that's just a way of saying, what is the industry doing? Where are people focusing their energies? Therefore, where should I focus my energies? What should I learn next, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but so you began life as a programmer, but now you've moved into management role. And things have changed a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you. So one of the things that sort of went around, and I think it's very common in development, but I've seen agencies try and fail to implement it, is a style of project management or called Agile. Do you guys use Agile or Waterfall, or do you have a preference of different management styles for managing these big projects? And the reason I ask is because I know that in an agency environment, we've tried to implement this for digital projects and things like that. And I don't know if we're failing because we don't have the expertise with Agile within an agency, just because it's not normally how agencies operate. But as agencies are becoming more and more digital, and they're having to try and compete with digital only shops, they're trying to sort of glom technologies and project management ideas and things like that from these digital firms. Can you speak at all to how you guys manage project management? What systems you guys use, any of that kind of stuff?
Sure. At Workfront, we do Waterfall. It's we're supposed to be agile, right? We even made it our focus for a while to target marketers and ad agencies that would need to, move their work over to digital space and start to adopt this agile methodology. So our product supports agile very well. But the problem is I haven't seen a lot of places that actually do agile 100%.
Can you break down agile for me, because I have no clue?
Oh, absolutely. That's a good idea.
That's actually probably a better place to start.
So, if you think traditional software development, the waterfall is the idea that, hey, we're going to set up this whole contract, and this is the feature list that needs to be done by this time frame. So everything is contract based, and whether or not something goes in is whether it was in the initial contract, and it doesn't change once development starts. Whereas Agile tries to say, okay, we're gonna go through these small chunks of time and just iterate on it and try to figure out that what we're doing is actually what the customer is going to want. So the customer gets involved a lot in that process, and whether that customer is external or internal, it doesn't really matter. It's just the idea that we're going to be able to customize our workflow and what we're going to finally deliver based on the customer's needs. So it just makes it's a win-win, right? We're not wasting our time developing software that nobody wants, and the customer's going to get what they want because they're able to make changes throughout the process.
Have you found that as I know that I'm guilty of having worked with another guy on another project of saying, hey, we can do this, when really he didn't structure it to begin with in the first place, and now he has to go back and make a lot of revisions because it wasn't set up for that initially. Has that been a problem being, agile versus, is it waterfall?
Well, there's more. I mean, those are two methodologies. It's just, you think waterfall versus agile, old school versus new school.
Yeah, those are sort of the buzzy ones.
Yeah, and there's different types of agile. I mean, at my company, we do Scrum, we do Kanban, different ways of doing it. But in the end, I say there is no truly agile, because you think agile is more like an ideology. This is our goal. We want to develop in this way. But then the business gets involved, and you need to make money, and so product comes in and says, hey, we need these features in order to sell the product. Oh, and we need it before our competitor gets it, and we know that they're going to have it out in 1 year. So can we get this feature set done in 1 year? Sure, we'll do that agile but really we've been told what we need to work on and what we need to get done. So it's not really agile.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong too. So one of the sort of the things in agile is you work in these sprints, right? Where you sort of take a great big project and break it into little pieces versus, trying to eat a whole watermelon, you're cutting it into slices first.
Right.
And so, and I think that is sort of the difference with the water or the agile approach versus a waterfall approach.
Right.
And so anyway, just to sort of clarify that a little bit, they get into these scrums, which are their little meetings or get-togethers, and then they sort of break it into these different projects. And I don't know each of the categories, but there's sort of a beginning stage, and then an in-process stage, and a ready for checkup stage, and stuff like that. And that's sort of how they work through the process of each.
Say you
component.
get a project from in your design firm or whatever. I'm wondering if the steps are similar between building software or building an ad campaign or
Yeah, I think they are to some degree. I think, which is why agency is trying to start adopting those processes. It's just, it's a different world, at least with a lot of the agencies I've worked with that haven't begun life as being particularly digitally savvy. It's not a methodology they're used to. It's sort of a new wave thing, and agencies sort of stick to doing things the way they always have. So until they bring in digital experts or folks that have worked, in digital firms or for software companies or whatever, you don't really learn about that. So for example, with one of the firm I consult with, they had one guy who was sort of an expert in Agile. So he was trying to roll that out to everybody, but nobody else is an expert on it. So it just never really caught, but it really has to be sort of cultural. You have to come into it and everybody has to buy into that methodology, and then you all have to sort of use it, and having one expert sort of trying to lead from the top down wasn't very effective.
Interesting. Being an outsider looking in, it's kind of, I find it, intriguing, just the steps and the process that, an industry would go through just to come up with the end result, because you have so many hats. You have, the sales guy versus the guy doing the actual work versus, the management. And I mean, I guess on that note, what changes have you noticed going from a programmer to like a management role? How has that changed your day-to-day life?
Well, I code less. I probably spend 40 to 50% of my time coding. And then the rest of it is a split between people management and project management.
Okay.
Well, and so with that, from, I guess, working on a team where you're not necessarily managing people, you're all sort of managing one project, to now where you're in charge and you're managing a team. Have you felt a shift in the dynamic or in the way that you work with everybody, or have you run into, I know a lot of people run into issues when they sort of advance, that those kind of left behind maybe either resent or have a problem with whoever's moved forward, because now, hey, you were the guy that we were in the trenches with and now you're telling me what to do. Have you run into any kind of problems like that, or?
Not problems, but definitely there have been changes in the relationship, but that's, to be expected. I've definitely noticed a different way that people talk to me and the way that they don't talk to me. It's like, hey, this guy has power over raises and he can fire me. I don't know. Just the role power definitely changes the dynamic of our relationship.
Yeah, and I guess, it's sort of a gut thing, but how do you like it? Do you prefer this? Was this where you wanted to end up, or do you prefer to be in the trenches?
It depends on the day that you ask me. I enjoy the ability that I have to have a greater influence in the company and have a greater impact in the lives of the people that I work with. But at the same time, I bear a lot of the stress and responsibility for that. And sometimes I have to do things that are unpleasant, such as, let people go. And that's uncomfortable for me. It's not what I want. I just want to be everybody's friend.
Dude, I avoid confrontation like the plague.
Well, I would say, honestly, if you enjoy firing people, I think you're also, there's other problems that you need to discuss. So I think, of course, anytime you're messing with somebody's livelihood, that's a difficult choice. Even if it was brought on by the offender, it's still never easy. But yeah, no, I guess now in this management position, and you're trying to run a company, can you talk? And this is a little bit technical, but can you speak at all to any of the tools that you use, like either internally at work or have used? I suppose you guys probably build a lot of your own software in your current position, but either where you're at now or in previous positions, can you speak to the types of tools that you would use to track projects, track your requirements from stage to stage, and how you sort of connect a whole team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we do at my current company, since Workfront, what they do is develop workflow management software, work management software. We use that to manage our projects, manage our tasks that we're working on. We use it for reporting how things are going in the progress. It does burn down, so we know if we're on track or off track. At previous jobs, I've used some of our competitors. I've used Jira. Same idea. It's the whole idea of digital work management is not new. It's been around for a while, and it's really great. Mike will know. He asked me to help out on his project. First thing I do is, hey, so I've got this software here, and I have no idea what you want me to do, but look, here's a bunch of tasks that you can create for me, and I can help out on that in that way. I'm a firm believer that it increases productivity. Like if you don't use some sort of digital work management software, you're doing it wrong.
Well, in fact, last week he's like, hey, put stuff in there for me to do because I don't know what you want me to do. And I look back, I'm like, I don't know what I need him to do.
Yeah, the workforce, we're becoming more spread out. You've got companies that have people, different offices all around the world, and we work in different time zones. So having some sort of digital work platform that you can, collaborate on is just essential. And, with our situation, we work remotely, and so it's the same idea as like, you can go in there, assign tasks, I can comment on it, and it helps to really know our progress. And you want to know that too. How close are we to being done? Well, if you have it all in that digital format, you can do reports on it, you can do projections and all that project management goodness.
And another thing that's key is actually doing it, because I'll admit right now I'm not good at it. I put a bunch of tasks in there, but I failed to go in and actually update, I've done this, I've done this. And I'll work on that.
Well, it's one of the biggest challenges that I'm presently working through. I mean, for people who know the show, I work with designers in Barcelona and Spain. And so I'm constantly working remote, and that's sort of the nature of my work. But I wondered, just while we're talking to Eric, and you brought up remote work, do you have a lot of experience working remotely with these other offices and things? Like, do you work outside of just your office here in town? And if you do, I wondered if you had any thoughts about this. So basically what I'm trying to do, or a project or a initiative that I'm sort of trying to work through right now, is this group that I'm consulting with. We have a team in Utah and a team in New York, and we're technically New York based, but I'm trying to use either a combination of technology or communication to bridge the geographic divide and sort of group these teams together. For the last 12 years, these two teams have worked in separate silos as two different teams under this management structure. Now they're being asked to work together as one, and we're having a really hard time breaking sort of business as usual behavior. I wondered if you had any insights on sort of bridging that communication gap, or if you could recommend tools, services or technologies, things that you might use. Maybe I don't know enough about Workfront to say, but maybe if you've got an office on the other side of the country somewhere, how might you work with developers on the other end? Of course, this digital management platform that we were just talking about would be obviously one tool that you're using, but what other tools do you guys use with regularity? Things like Slack, things like, other technologies that you might use to bridge geographic gaps.
Yeah, for sure. We've got some offices over in Poland and Armenia, I think somewhere in London. So, we use Slack, as you said, as a way of instant communicating with people. The time zone different makes it so that you've either got to be in early or very late in order to communicate with them over Slack. One thing we do is every meeting we have on our calendars always has a Zoom meeting attached to it. So we've got the video conferencing going on, and I don't know that we are unique in any way, but again, the collaboration tool helps in that if we've got tasks or projects that we're working on together, you're right there making comments on the actual work that we're trying to get done, so that helps. But I wouldn't say that we've solved all those problems, and what you said with silos, it still exists within our company, even within, Utah-based our company. It's a challenge.
You just sort of people working in tight groups.
Yeah.
For example, the two teams that are now combined in the group I'm working with used to be Team 4 and Team 6, and now they're supposed to be Team New York. And and so they were in an individual silo where they were working separately on tasks, and now they're being asked to work together. And so I've been doing a lot of research in this space, which is why I'm extra curious about it and trying to hear what other companies are doing. And I was studying a company called Automatic, who have 300 and something employees, maybe more than that at this point, but they're all remote. They don't have a central office anywhere, and they do everything by Slack and by blog and some different things like that. I wondered, a lot of people, it seems like in tech especially, really like Slack as a tool. Do you guys use it for more than just instant messaging though? Like we use a platform called Teamwork, which is, I guess, sort of similar project management type software. And we're running into problems with adoption of Slack because it feels like we're maybe duplicating efforts a little bit.
Yeah,
you can use Slack to instant message.
The podcast, we have a Slack channel for that, and it seems to me like why?
But we could use Apple Messages. We can use Google's chat function, And so it's like we've got these redundancies. So I mean, as somebody that uses Slack all the time, can you speak to why Slack? I mean, in what capacity do you guys use it? Do you use it to manage projects or anything, or is that all managed through your other platform, and then you just use Slack for communication?
Mostly it's just a glorified instant messenger. because it has GIFs. Why else would you? No,
Yeah, of course.
No, one of the
Giphy
key
plugin is the
features
coolest thing.
that it has is integrations, right? So it can integrate with our calendar, so we know when people are off, out sick or whatever. It just pops up without even them trying to communicate it. Or again, as coders, we're checking in code, and that pops up when there's a code review. So the integrations are a powerful feature for us. And then the idea of just spinning up ad hoc rooms. Again, we work in a production environment where occasionally a bug will slip out that interferes with our customers' work, and so an incident channel gets spun up, and anyone that needs to be is in there. So I mean, it's a glorified chat room. It is for that. But it works much better. We did use Hangouts before, and we moved to this again mainly because of the guests. But no,
A step up from AOL Instant Messenger.
a small step.
Yeah, marginal.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't let the guys at Slack hear that. So, okay, well, cool. Well, that's really interesting because, yeah, I mean, like I say, we're trying to figure out how to work in this world where, our the company I'm consulting with has got 5 offices in 5 different states, and it's all this trying to bridge gaps. And I'm very used to working remote, but my company was built that way from the start. So we have systems and things in place. We use a lot of different chatting tools, and I guess the moral of the story is just communication. But it's that hybrid of managing projects long distance with people in different time zones, and how you facilitate all that communication. So anyway, it was interesting to get, your take on that.
So, side note, over the years, I'm sure, there's been ups and downs and, learning curves. Have you ever had just a major oops that I can't think of an example, but is there any I messed up really bad, and this is why, or I know I've had a few of those in my career.
Yeah, I since my very first job while I was still in college, when I deleted a production database. No, but I told them it was their fault. They should not have given me access. No, that's the most serious thing I've ever done was delete a production database. But no, I mean, most of the time it's just the processes in place where if I make a mistake, it's generally small. It doesn't have a huge impact. I mean, I've always worked for companies that have a good quality control process in place. So if I have code that's going to screw things up, then generally gets caught. Yeah. So I can't think of a major fail in any career type thing.
Well, that's good.
Well, and
knock
so
on something.
See if you can find any wood around here. Yeah. So I guess coming off of that question, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just, I guess, sort of the stick-to-itiveness and the sorts of things that you might look for in a developer that's coming to try and go to work for you. Are there characteristics that you look for in trying to identify a developer who might be really good? We talked earlier about education and things like that, so you've got sort of book smarts, you've got sort of self-taught and grit. Can you speak to the types of characteristics, or I guess really what I'm trying to get down to is, even though you deleted a database, you still stuck with it, and I think that for anybody in sort of a technical field like this, where there's a steep learning curve, it seems like there would be a lot of time dedicated to, you've got to be prepared to fail. And so I wondered if you could speak at all to that, about sort of in terms of a characteristic in a new hire or something that you might want to find, or in sort of, I don't know, going through these struggles and then sticking to it.
Yeah, for sure. In any tech company where you're trying to get a software engineering job, they're going to look for your tech chops. But at a certain level, it becomes expected that you can do the job, or you wouldn't have gotten where you got. So it's almost like a sanity check to make sure that you haven't somehow slid by, or you're lying on your resume or something. So, mostly it is about that culture fit and making sure that the candidate has the values that we're looking for. And one book that was really influential for me and others at Workfront was The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. And in that book, he talked about, how do you find a candidate or an employee that is the ideal team player? And he simplifies it down to these 3 things, and it's hungry, smart, and what was the third one?
I'm going with dedication.
No, hungry, smart, and of course it leaves me right now. There's a third one. It's going to come to me, but
we're going to leave it on you to listen to it and find out.
something about good looks or something. I'm pretty sure.
So we look for
Physical
those characters in it, and so we have questions that we ask around that. Is like, is this person hungry? Are they somebody who's going to be continually learning? Are they smart? And by smart, I don't mean just intelligence, but like people smart. Like, are they the kind of person that gets when something they've said offends other people? And I wish I could remember that third one, but it's more important, I think, in the end, that somebody has a good cultural fit, and that, again, they have that hunger, because they'll learn whatever it is they need to know to get their job done.
So on that note, are there any books that you enjoy just reading in general? And I know that you recommended one to me. It was just JavaScript, the basics was one, and I started reading that and haven't gotten past the second chapter.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound like a super fun read.
No, it's not, but I mean...
So the third key, by the way, is humble.
There it is.
So humility.
And so to the rescue.
That's right. Well, and I'm looking here at this model here, this idea of how humble, hungry, and smart all work together to create that ideal team player. And if you really think about your coworkers and people like that, these really are three characteristics that you would want out of a coworker or out of an employee if you're hiring. It's good to be hungry, it's good to be smart, but that humble thing is kind of a big deal too. And I think that just in terms of being a good people person and being people smart, like you mentioned, I think having some humility, I think is a good thing. I think it's easy to come into, or I've seen it at least in my industry, and I assume it's common in yours as well, the sort of the hotshot programmer, or the guy who thinks he's a hotshot programmer anyway.
Yeah, that's me.
And like Mike here. And you can't really teach humility by the time they're at that age, so I can understand why that would be a big factor in hiring the right guy.
Yeah, and he goes off onto all these creative terms for this. I think what you just described was the bulldozer, and it's amazing. It's like, again, he's simplifying things, but when you get into it,
you're thinking
these
of that
labels,
person at work, and you're like, that's him.
Yeah. Oh, and it's exactly what you do. You're like, oh yeah, that's me. But it shows how if you are imbalanced in any of those areas, you become, for some reason, not the ideal team player. So that's why we focus on that more than anything at work, is trying to get that ideal team player. But we fail sometimes. I mean, you've got a couple hours to decide whether or not this person meets this criteria. It's hard.
Do you ever hire someone on like a temporary basis where, just to see if they fit with the team? And then, we'll give you 10 days or 15 days and decide from there, or is that kind of not the way to go?
We don't at Workfront. I mean, everything's at will, right, in Utah, but no, it's hard because like people leave their jobs. Most people who apply, they still are employed. So to try to say it's a temporary thing would be, not real nice for them. They're giving up their job, coming here, and we're like, we messed up. It's kind of on us. We need to get our process down and make sure that we're not screwing with people's lives. So
yeah. Another thing, we've got to be getting up there on time, but
we're almost there.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to ask you about is, and this is something that's been kind of a recurring theme. It's funny because if you string together these shows, you can see where my brain's at any moment, because I ask the same types of questions.
What do I need to learn right now?
Well, it's all the places that I find where I'm weak, or I need answers to what's going on in my life. So I keep taking it out on everybody that's willing to do the show. But I wanted to ask you, Eric, about mentorship and the importance of having a mentor.
By the way, thank you for mentoring me.
Well, and not just being willing to mentor people, even the helpless like Mike, but finding mentors in your own life. Like, what do you think of that in general as part of maturing as a professional, as excelling in a field? Do you think it's important to find mentors versus going it all alone, and that kind of thing? I just wondered if you had any perspective on that.
No, I'm a big fan of mentors. I think that it is actually one of those key things that's going to set you apart above the rest. Is, do you have somebody that you can check in with on a regular basis, that you can bounce ideas off of? They can help give you advice that can tell you where to focus your energies. It's like back to what Mike said earlier. You don't always know what you don't know. if you had a mentor back then that was helping walk through the process, that you would have had a better idea of how much time what you were getting into. It's and even at my level, I haven't gotten a mentor, because at Workfront we don't have a more formal process at my level. But we typically, once you come into Workfront, you get assigned a mentor. But I've been looking for one myself. It's like, who do I want to help me help mentor me, so that I know where I need to go next? How do I get to the next level of leadership?
Yeah, it's maybe even, it's, sort of changes by profession or by job. In this case, now the mentor you might be looking for would have more to do with management styles and how to improve as a manager versus how to be a better programmer or whatever. So it's, I think sort of a lifelong learning exercise. To go back to what you were saying earlier about, something you look for in an ideal candidate. So one of the things, before we do the show or before we interview anybody, we send out this little questionnaire, behind the scenes, just to, pull the curtain back a little bit. We send out this questionnaire and we ask our guests to, give us some background information. And one of these things, again, we're just peering into my psychology here. But one of the things that Eric mentioned as sort of a fun fact is that he's very passionate until he isn't. And I wanted to talk to you about this. So I don't know if you're familiar. There's a book called The War of Art by a guy named Stephen Pressfield. And I think it's geared, he was a copywriter, I believe. And so it's geared more towards sort of I guess what you would call the creative arts. But the big moral of the story is this idea of overcoming roadblocks. And you've got, you had sort of responded to this question that you fully dedicate to things until you burn out or get tired of them, that a lot of times you'll get 80-90% and then walk away from it.
Well, I think he also mentioned that the 80-90% is more like 10% in a web world, because you get the 80-90% complete on the front end and realize that you still have all this other stuff to do on the back end.
And but I wonder, relative to this idea of running into these roadblocks or these stopping blocks that sort of keep you, from completing these goals or whatever it is, I wondered if you could speak a little bit about your experience, why you think you might be this way, and how we could all get through this so that we can start completing our projects. From
my perspective, again, with the engineer mindset, what drives an engineer? It's that problem solving. So as long as the problem is interesting, I'm all for it. And so to speak to what Mike said, if I'm doing a project around the house, I get 89% there. So I might, build a desk for my daughter, but then the final trimming, it looks pretty good right now. So the challenge is over. I'm done. But with the web, it's like that initial 10 to 20% is where all the fun challenges are. Like, how do I get this thing set up? How do I do that? And once it's done, it's like, now it's just mundane. I'm back into the normal stuff I'm used to doing. So now it feels like work. So I don't want to do it anymore. So it's that. But again, the same thing happens at work. I have mundane tasks that are, I've had this, I'm just making another whatever widget that I've made 100 times before. It's not really exciting. But then it's just, where you lean on your professionalism. You say, I'm being paid to do a job. And it might not be the most fun job in the world at the moment, but I'm going to get it done so that I can be that, professional. And I just have to lean on it with whatever that own self, that work ethic,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that is just, I don't know. I like to hear from professionals that they all do the same crap I do, because I sort of assume that there's something wrong with me. And so I think
don't rule that out.
Well, no, it's entirely possible. Both things can be true at once. But I do think, I don't know, it almost, for me anyway, it serves as a little bit of encouragement to know that I'm not so different. And for other people who have this sort of similar problem, I'm notorious. Well, Mike's been along the ride for most of these, but it's constant business ideas and, that'd be cool if we did this or, whatever it is along the way. But the seeing things through to completion part.
Well, it almost took us a year to get this off the ground.
Well, so. Yeah, this podcast, for example, as silly as it is, or as whatever it is, this is like one of the few things that Mike and I have had as a brainchild together, and then followed through with and actually completed. And that's why, we don't make a ton of money off this thing. We don't, but the experience of it, following through is so satisfying that we really take a great deal of satisfaction out of doing the show. And so I think, to your point, don't let me speak for you, but we're still maybe in that 90%. Maybe, you know, if we got to the point where we, you know, are just looking for sponsors all the time and just trying to, you know, not really doing it for us anymore, but trying to make it into the business or whatever, maybe we won't get as much out of it as we do now.
On that note,
although we need sponsors. So so if anyone wants to kick in, I know a guy.
Yeah, I was going to just say that, you know, for me and doing this podcast, just the connections and the friendships that I've been able to develop over, you know, the course of the last 41 episodes. It's kind of neat to know that I know this guy Anderson in New Jersey that is into sneaker art, and you know, I could hit him up if I need something, or Dylan Mangus from last week followed me on Instagram, and now we have this mutual connection. Even though I've never met the guy in person, it's neat to have our hour of communication and getting to know him. I feel like I know them, and it that's satisfying enough to me, even without the sponsorship that we could definitely use. That is rewarding enough for me to keep wanting to do it.
And you get cool t-shirt.
Yeah, I do.
Got a good side skateboards t-shirt on.
Yeah, Mike is wearing the good side skateboard t-shirt. Everybody go buy a deck from those guys. New spring line's out.
Yep.
So I guess with that, the one last thing I want to ask, and this is just, you know, one of those dumb kind of throwaway questions, but I wanted to ask you anyway, just because you've achieved a pretty, you know, a solid degree of success in your field. You've come from the bottom and worked your way to a management position. If you could go back in time and tell yourself, your younger self, one thing, or if you could help yourself have course corrected at some point in your career, what kind of advice would you give your younger self?
I would have probably told myself to take on the harder work sooner. You know, like any developer, I think goes into a job, you're very concerned about hitting deadlines. So it's very normal to take on the easier work, but it's those really hard problems, those hard features and hard tasks that really have helped me to grow in my career and get to the point where I can feel like, you know, I am an expert in front end programming. At least I maybe at one point was more of an expert in the back end, but if you don't do the hard things, you don't grow to that level.
Yeah, I can actually relate to that. The last little thing I did on the website that I was trying to build a range slider that you know, you can set a value at the beginning and a value at the end, so like a budget per se, and just being able to figure out how to import that, use it, and you know, there's still little things it needs to be connected to the database and all that other stuff, but just being able to get functionality and get the CSS working and all the different stuff, when it finally loaded, you hit the refresh on the thing, it never works, and then it finally does. It's like, you can't, I love that feeling. It's great, you know, so I can see that. But
cool. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap this show up. Not super active on social media, but you can find Eric Merrill on LinkedIn. It's a good place to find him and hire him for whatever you want. VP roles, CEO positions, you know, whatever you need. You can find out about me and my company, R2 Media Group, at r2mg.com.
And you can find out about me at djontic.com.
And you can find out everything about the show at eggscast.com or at It's Eggs on or Eggs Show.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to edit that.
Google
so it's
it.
Clear.
Nah.
Yeah. At Egg Show on Twitter and Instagram.
Cool.
And with that, Eric, thanks so much, man, for taking this time. I mean, it's we're coming up on 9:30 at night on a school night, a week night.
It's bedtime, man.
Yeah, right.
Like, what am I doing up? Get out
And
of my
so
house.
and he was willing to open up his house to us so we could do this show. So we're really
thank you.
grateful for that.
Yep.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. And with that, everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
All right.